Hello. Welcome, everyone. Um, we are here for another talk story. I am Neta with the PI Health Board, and I have a very special guest today. Um, and yeah, today's talk story um, will be talk of forms of domestic violence that include mental, emotional, and physical abuse. There will be mentions of sexual assault, and while these are very triggering, I hope that we are able to think about how it shows up in our PI communities, um, and that these discussions help guide us in healing our communities and supporting each other. So, I'm going to go ahead and let our guest, Esther, you want to introduce yourself today?
Yahweh, hello everyone. My name is Esther DeBrome. I am with the Marshallese community. I work with the Pacific Islander Health Board. Thank you for this space.
Okay, so I guess that's me then. Um, yeah, no, I just want to say thank you so much, PI Health Board, for having me here today. As Neta mentioned, my name is Sela. I am an organizer with API Chaya, which stands for oh my gosh, let me like not let my nerves get to me, which stands for Asian Pacific Islander Chaya. And this organization actually works to end systemic harm within our communities, um, especially when it comes to DV, domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. I'm also part of the PI Health Board, so I feel like I'm right at home. Um, I think more importantly than that, just as Esther mentioned, I do come from the Tongan community. My mother's name is Emelita Kautai, who is the daughter of Anafifita Tonga, who is also the daughter of Velonika Siai Afime Mo'unga, who is the daughter of a woman named Ane, whose last name is unknown, who was a um, who was a slave from Kiribati within the Tongan palace. And so the reason why I bring up my matriarch is because um, this work is very personal to me. It goes deep when we talk about, like, even right now, I'm like slowly getting out of breath. Yeah, slowly getting out of breath, just naming my line, because I come from a very strong line, but I also come from a very harmful line, a survival line, especially being part of a history that I'm sure Tonga is not proud of. And I claim Tongan to a T. But I think I do show the utmost gratitude to be in spaces like this because of my matriarch's survivorship. I'm able to share space with you all here today. And so I just want to ground our talk story today in that ancestral space. Um, I did prepare a presentation. It's more because if you know me, I can go on a tangent. I will be out in outer space talking about Lord knows what.
Not the outer space.
Y'all will be like, sis, you lost me. So I am, unless someone else had anything to add to that, I would like to go ahead and start that presentation.
One second here.
Okay, I
Okay.
was gonna say, and while we're waiting for, oh, there it is. Uh, so API Chaya, the way it actually came about is, and I'm sure if y'all know Lika, she was a part of this startup too. The way API Chaya actually began was there was a woman named Susanna Blackwell who was pregnant and she was trying to get away from her abuser. She was here. It was, I hate the word mail order, but she was a mail order bride, so she was brought here through one of those dating mail things. And she started to go through domestic violence. And so, in the process of her trying to get away from her abuser, she had two supporters with her who are Phoebe DeZone and Veronica Johnson. Well, the abuser ended up shooting both of them in court. And that is actually why in King County we have the metal detectors, is because of that. But it also sparked this movement within the community that, like, yo, like, this is not okay. This is where our justice system failed us, right? So how do we as a community come together, and how do we respond in ways that are culturally relevant to our community, right? Like, we don't call the police. Like, I'm sure if you were getting whooped by your parents growing up, a lot of y'all, like, I'm pretty sure you were like, I'm gonna call the police. If your parents were like my mom and dad, it was like, I didn't even try it, but I seen one of my siblings try it, and they're like, yep, get into that bedroom. You're going to see what's going to happen to you today. So, right? Like, um, which we joke and we laugh about it, right? Like, that's the light part of our childhood. But, it's important to recognize, like, hey, if we can't call the police, and let's say the abuse was really serious, how do we center our community in solutions that'll actually work? But before I begin, I want to go through some agreements. So next slide. Community agreements. So, the purpose of this space is to honor survivors. Obviously, I started off with my ancestral line. Um, it's also a learning space. I'm not gonna lie. I am not an expert nor a professional, which kind of like triggered me in the email, but I am a community member. I am a survivor of violence. I am a person of Tongan descent. And just like many of you all who are in this space, you are also experts within your community and know what your community need best. So I would like to just ground the space in, I'm not here to teach y'all. This presentation ain't even here to teach y'all. It's more, like I said, a guide for me to not go off topic, kind of like I'm doing right now. Um, and some of the things that you might hear or learn today, um, it's going to be different, like, because um, we grew up in a society where we were taught that we're very powerless. It's important to step into your power. Like, it's very important for you as an oceanic person, as someone who is going through harm. It's very important for you to step into your power. And sometimes stepping into your power, it really means you're going to have to try new ideas on that don't resonate with who we are, right? And so, with that being said, just like Netha named earlier in her beautiful introduction, um, I do invite you to take care of yourselves in this space, because when it comes to talking about harm, when it comes to talking about violence, a lot of times we can be triggered, right? And so, if you need to turn your screen off, please do. If you need to step away, um, also, please feel free to step away, get you some tea, pour yourself a shot, whatever works for you. I'm not judging. This is a learning space. And so I invite you to show up in the way that you feel the most comfortable in. Um, like I said, we're here to learn together. And so, with that being said, something that I like to do, this is me off the record, by the way. Something that I like to do, because it is very, oh, something I forgot. If you all have something to say, feel free to jump in. Like, jump in, be like, I have a question, I have a comment, I have a story that relates to that. It's talk story. Because if you give me the mic, I'll just go off. And so y'all gotta learn to just be, again, step in your power and be like, so
So true. So
um,
true.
um, So because the topics are very heavy, I would like to do an exercise that we usually do with API Chaya, and it's to breathe. And this is part of trying it on, right? Like, this is a brave space. I know sometimes when I tell people, like, let's do a breathing exercise, they be looking at me like, girl, nah. Like, but we come from the islands where the life is so much slower, and so there's more time to take deep breaths. Then we come over here where we're constantly on the go, trying to meet deliverables, trying to do all these things. um Her name is Kawi, and if you guys ever get the chance to go and get lomied by her, she's a Hawaiian massage therapist. And something that she had said to me that I thought was so interesting was, she said, here in the diaspora, we have learned to take shallow breaths, very meaningless breaths. And so I sat there and I thought about it, and I was like, wow, we really do, especially doing this work. Just like Lika Smith said last time, she said, we are constantly responding, constantly trying to get food out, constantly trying to survive, constantly trying to get meal tickets to folks, right? But sometimes um, it's good to pause and take a breath. And what breathing actually does to you is, it actually, when you breathe in, you're breathing in oxygen into your mind, but you're also releasing toxins from your body, carbon dioxide, right? Um, and so we're gonna do the 444 breathing thing. And I can already tell by Esther's face, she's like, this girl's tripping. Um, but what we're going to do is we're going to exhale all of the toxins out of us first, and then we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it in for 4 seconds, and then breathe out for 4 seconds. And we'll do that 3 times. Okay. So go ahead and exhale. And if you want to make a sound I learned from a real psychologist. Look at me, not making this up. A real psychologist. Sound actually is a form of release. So if you're ever stressed, just scream. Um, it'll produce endorphins in your mind. So it's very interesting, learning to reconnect to your bodies. Okay, so exhale, and we're gonna breathe in, hold it, and exhale. Now we're gonna breathe back in, hold it, and exhale. Breathe back in, hold it, and exhale. And I hope you start to feel like you have reconnected into your lung space. When I think about breathing, I think of my childhood, and in the Tongan way, when you go and greet someone, you say Fe'iloaki, alo Fe'iloaki mo fifine koe, and it means to know. But in the Tongan way, the way we greet, we don't kiss each other. Like, a lot of people think we kiss each other, but what the elders would do is they would put their face to your face and they would breathe. And as a kid, I was like, why is she saluting me? She is crazy. Like, I don't
So
want to go
true.
say hi to her. I don't want to go say hi to grandma or grandpa or whoever, uncle, auntie. I never wanted, like, think, because they would sniff your face. But something that, like, correlated that just came into my mind was my childhood and going to visit my grandma. And when my parents would say Alufe walking Mofine Eki, I remember her specifically breathing into my face. So with that being said, we can go ahead and change the slide.
No, that's so true about the sniffing thing, because you're right, we're not kissing. The everyone is literally like breathing you in, and kind of like, you're right, it lets us know. Um
Yeah.
that we're
No,
meeting.
I know, like they're breathing in who you are, like
Yeah.
look at me, that's the mana, right? They breathe in the mana of their chin. Um, yeah. Sorry, Esther, did you have something to add to that?
Oh no, you were just talking about how you were like, I'm not gonna kiss grandma, and I'm thinking grandpa's greasy hair gel, because them old, back
Yeah.
then they had this really thick hair gel, and there's that certain aroma. I don't want to
Yeah,
insult
no.
anybody, but there's that smell, and it can, when you smell it, and every now and then you're like, oh, grandpa.
Yeah, it's strong, huh? Like it's strong. That's how I feel about coconut oil. Um, mm, yeah, so just transitioning, I want to open up the space and actually ask you, what words have you used or heard others use to describe domestic violence? What situations or descriptions comes up for you when you hear DV, specifically in our communities? Neta, you can join the conversation, so you can come out of that.
Well, you know how in our community, just talking about violence against women, against anybody is like taboo. Like that's their business. We don't talk about it. And
Mm,
so growing up, I never hear that. Like it's hush hush. We don't talk about it. Even though as kids you see it, you're not supposed to talk about it. It's like you don't see it at all. And so I just recently, like when I moved here to America and started hearing it, you hear it on the news, you hear people talk about it, and here I am sitting and thinking, oh, they're really open about these things. We don't even talk about this. We just, pretend it doesn't happen, or we just mind our own business because we grow up, you know, they taught us to just, as a kid, you're supposed to just sit and listen and, just do what the elders tell you to do. So it's like right now when I think about the word or when I hear it, domestic violence, or when I see it, I try to avoid it as much as possible because it brings up
mhm,
some really bad memory for me. So I try not to. I was like, as long as I don't think about it, it's not there.
mm, mhm.
And so coming here, I was actually late because I was thinking, do I go or do I not go? Do I go? But then a couple days ago, I had a dream about what had happened to me.
Mm.
It was exactly how it happened, but I woke up trying not to. I was shaking when I woke up because instead of me, it was my daughter.
Oh,
And so I guess, and I did talk to another survivor who went through the same thing I did, and she actually talked about it. And her situation to me, I'm not saying my situation wasn't as bad as hers, but seeing her go up there and talk about something like that, it took me a while. We did this
mhm.
before, and I saw her talking about it, and it just triggered something in me. And it made me think about all the things that we have in common. And then when I had that dream, I was like, it's almost like I have to say something because, one of my niece, my daughters, any girl in my family or my friend's family, anybody in our community might be going through the same thing. But again, you know, we're not talking about it.
Did Sorry, I'm gonna ask a question really quick. Did um did that happen did your abuse happen before or after you had your daughter?
Before, it was like years and years ago. I was I was
And you don't have to talk about
four
it.
or five.
Oh wow. I only asked because they're just now doing studies, and a really good book that touches on it is called The Body Keeps the Score. And your body literally remembers, like it's encoded into your DNA, right? So I just thought it was crazy that you had a dream of your daughter. um you had a dream of your daughter because um, who knows, your daughter may have felt it, like even though she may not have experienced it, it's still like the trauma that happens to our mothers, which is why I always start with my maternal. Like people are like, why don't you ever acknowledge? I was like, I acknowledge my other line. You see my whole name on my name. I put my daddy's last name on there. um but I always acknowledge my maternal line because trauma passes down. um, that's something that I feel like we really need to address in the oceanic community. It really does pass down in your DNA. And, you know, right now, something that's trending online is breaking generational curses. And it's like breaking generational curses is also healing that internal trauma. um, and I don't know how that's gonna look like for you and your daughter, but yeah, thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you wanted to continue on. Sorry, I totally interrupted you.
It's okay, and I think like just from that experience when I was young and having to try to tell the women in my family
mm,
and was told, don't talk about it.
mm,
Do not tell your father about this. Do not tell any of your brothers. And my dad let me get away with everything. He spoiled me, and I could talk to him about everything except that. And for some reason, I felt like, what if I talk about it and he hates me? Because even the people that I was really close to, that I thought would protect me, didn't. Like for the longest time, I felt I, you know, I bought it on myself. Like, and then I guess from that experience, when I was older and got into a relationship, even that relationship, because there are some things that we went through that just, you know, it brings back memory. And I think that was one of the cause that makes me didn't really have a, what's that word? Like close relationship. I don't even know how to describe it, but I never talked about it with anybody. And when the abuse started, because he said, you're a woman and you're not doing what you're supposed to do to provide for your partner. And and again, I couldn't talk about it. When we go out, smile, because you're supposed to be happy. And I come from a family that, you know everybody expects you to be perfect. You go to a really good school, you make, friends with all the people in your community that will uplift you or get you somewhere, I'd say. And I guess that was one of the reasons why I felt like, because I come from a small island,
mm,
everybody know everybody, and everybody knows everybody's business, and people judge you. People look at you when you're one of the families that are, you have elders in your family that are well known. You have to be perfect, because if you do something bad, it's almost like everybody's judging not just you but your whole family. There
mm,
are where people would say, "Oh, well, our parents didn't teach her any manners, or our parents didn't teach her this and this," and so, you know, everybody thought that I was happy. For the
mm,
longest time, I was happy because they don't see me looking sad or, you know, walking around like. So I kept that. I, the abuse, everybody sees it. His family see it. My dad, for the longest time, didn't know. When he finally heard about it, that's why I'm here in America. He sent me here.
mm.
And from that, I went to another relationship. And this relationship lasted longer than the other ones. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to be married to this person. I did love him. He didn't treat me like the other one treated me. And everything was all perfect. Well, not really perfect. Every couple have their,
Mhm.
issues. But to my way of thinking, it was so much better than what I had before. And so I became, acquainted with all of his family, his friends. Same for him. And everything was okay, but not okay.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
he wasn't abusing me. He didn't raise his hands on me. But I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and some of the symptoms was anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
And even though he didn't, you know, raise his hands to me, the words,
Mhm.
those words that when you're struggling with anxiety, I've tried not to take the medication. I tried to do herbal, but it's just so hard. His words just keep repeating in my head for so long. I find myself crying myself to sleep every night. There are days where I can't even get out of bed. I just lie in there. And when you're from the island, this is not normal. This is people look
Right.
at you and go, stop being lazy.
Mm.
Get out of bed, go cook dinner, go take the kids to school. Why are you being lazy? That's why you're fat, because you're laying in bed every day, every day. And that word fat, it just got to me to where I'm
Mm.
doing all kinds of diet. There was one point where I just thought, you know what, I can't, I really can't do it anymore. There was thoughts of suicide because even though I was surrounded by families, I come from a large family on both sides,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I can't even talk to any of my sisters about it. I can't talk to anybody about it because you're not supposed to be like this. You go to church. You're from a church family. You grew up in a church. You have families. You have uncles. You have everybody goes to church, and I even have family members say, you know what? You don't read the Bible more. You
Mm.
should pray. And I'm not saying that those are bad things, but when you're struggling, it's even though I know that that's what I'm supposed to do or that's what I need to do. When when it like when you're going through an episode like that, you don't you can't even. I've heard about it, but I was usually like everybody else think, oh, it's just the white person thing. It
Mm.
doesn't happen to us. We're islanders. We got support, and we do, but it's you don't want people to judge you and say, oh, she's going mental, or there's even words about me being cursed. You're cursed because you did something. And so you don't want people to look at you a certain way or talk about you a certain way, so you try to smile.
Mm.
You try to help as many people as you can, because to my way of thinking, if if I just do good and just to help people, they won't look at my dark side. They won't think of all of these negative stuff that are happening. And so again, I just recently separated from that person
Mhm.
because it got to me. We don't sleep in the same room anymore. We don't talk like we used to anymore. And it's just ever since they died, I feel like ever since they told me about my sickness and then not having to give him a child, I felt like he's drifted away, and that's got people would say that's not abuse. But as part when I start working with Pip, even the verbal, the emotional things that it gets you to where I'm like, you know what,
Mm,
I can't do this anymore. And my leaving is has nothing to do with you know you. It's me. I'm
mhm,
trying to do this for me. And so I asked him if I can leave.
yeah,
He wouldn't listen to me. Didn't think that I was serious because I've always said that I'll leave, but I never did because I
mm,
was scared. And I guess for a good reason, because now that we're separated, we have um we have mutual friends, and right now that we're separated, everybody has turned their backs on me. I I have family members who said, "What is wrong with you? Why would you do that?" I have family members who say, "Oh, she used him, and now that her kids are grown, she doesn't. She left him." They made it look like I had no right to leave that relationship.
mm, mhm,
I am being threatened by people because of their thought that I kicked him out of our home, which I didn't. Nobody bothered to ask me what happened.
mm,
Nobody bothered to, even my own family didn't ask me. And I feel like it's because it's my fault. I'm the woman. I started it. I left that relationship. I'm going into another relationship. So, of course, it's my fault because I left one and then now I'm about to leave another one. And I think that's why a lot of because I've seen this happen so many times, a lot of the women in my community won't leave because, you know, once you leave one relationship and you go into another, people look at you like you're a hoe.
mm,
Can I say that?
yeah,
Sorry.
because it's very real. Look at me. This isn't even my platform, and I'm over here like, yes, you may, yes, keep it 100.
They're their kids, They said, if it was so bad, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay? Well, look at now. I left, and what gets me was when we separated, all of my family member got mad because he cried to them. And just because he cried, I'm the bad person.
Mm,
And they don't even know how for 5 years I've had to cry in that closet. My kids were away. My son went back home. My daughter went to stay with her dad. And it was just the two of us. And at night, I would be alone in the house with my thoughts. And of course, when you have anxiety, and then you come home, and instead of comforting or trying to, be understanding, you need to stop it because the walls are thin, the neighbors will hear you. What are they going to think? They're going to think I'm abusing you. And yes, people will say, that's all he did? That's it?
Mm,
Really? That's it? And it's not just that. It's just having the support, when you're trying to be happy. It's hard when, and your home should be like the one place where you feel safe and comfortable. And my boss, Lika, is always saying, when COVID hit, she was like, you need to stay home. You need to stay put. I'm going to find you a job that you can stay still.
mhm,
But I couldn't because every time I walked in here and stay inside this place, even now, just looking at it, it's depressing.
mm,
It's depressing. It's like I hear the echo of his. He's quiet. It's very quiet. But then when he talk, the words that they just
yeah,
they make you think. Have self doubt, and it echoes. People think, oh, she's talking like that because she's crazy. She's
mm,
crazy, and maybe I should have brought up or get help from what happened to me a while back. I'm thinking maybe if I had talked before, none of this would have happened.
mm. Um, I want to say thank you so much for sharing that. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength. The fact that you're doubting yourself, yeah, that
A
kind of
lot of
speaks.
drinks.
I told you show up, however. um, it definitely takes a lot of strength, especially coming from a community that is rooted in colonization. Um, when I hear your story, I think about how the term wellness is defined within our communities, and wellness has been translated by colonizers into perfection, right? And that's not true. Um, we know that wellness is a holistic thing, and so um, it oh man, I have so many reflections, but I'm like looking at the time, like, oh man, like just just that in itself, right? Like even you looking at yourself as a bad person, I cringe, like, I cringe, and that's a journey that I had to go through myself, right? Was, stepping out of this, "If I do this, I'm good. If I do that, I'm bad." When really we are complex human beings and that the Lord has gifted us with complex emotions, right? Like, that's not even on some anti-Christian thing, that is a Christian thing. The fact that creation comes from the creator who is God, right? Like um we are complex beings. Um and so I just want to uplift you, and I'm just sending you so much love through this screen right now. Um cuz I feel like Neta has something to say as well. I feel like Neta wants to add. I don't know if do you want to add?
No, a lot of things were popping, like sparking in my mind and heart, as you were sharing your experience, Esther. Especially when you said, like, when we think about, at least like younger Neta, if a conversation sparked up about domestic violence, it would be like, oh my god, I'm thinking of someone hitting somebody,
Mhm,
like.
mhm,
But when Esther was explaining, like, he didn't raise a hand, but like the things he was saying was still hurtful, I was like, yes. And then you talking about how body keeps a score, even our
mhm,
bodies listening to words like
mhm, mhm.
hurts. Like it hurts and it causes, the symptoms of anxiety, depression. And so, yeah, it's like uncovering the layers of
Right.
how to heal in these situations. So,
Right. Well,
yeah.
I think it's important to name too that domestic violence is this umbrella term, right? A lot of people believe that DV is like someone physically harming you, but DV is actually so DV, the way the general definition is DV is a pattern of physical and psychological abuse, threats, intimidation, isolation, or economic coercion used by one person to exert power and control over another person in the context of a dating, family, or household relationship. So within our PI community, we only are familiar with physical violence, obviously, um, but psychological violence, the use of isolation, it all falls under domestic violence. And what it is I was like, let me back up because I have so much to say right now and I need to keep it contained. Um, we have to highlight that it's a pattern, right? And okay, so let me collect
It's
my
on the
thoughts.
next slide that
Oh
you
yeah,
actually
no.
want to mention.
Yeah. But also it makes it harder to decide if it was an actual incident or if it was just what happened, right? Like something that happened in that moment, which is what kind of makes you feel like you're going crazy, right? Is because
Yeah,
it's
and the other thing was when they asked me, why'd you wait so long?
mm,
He would threaten suicide.
right,
So
right,
when you have that on your head, you're like, I don't want to be the reason why somebody died.
mm-hmm,
And they're like, well, then why you leave now?
right.
It just, it just got to a point where I'm like, you know what? You die, I die, we all die. If you don't care, but I need to, I need to leave because I am losing my mind,
mm,
and then leaving now. I think is because I, it's not because all of a sudden I'm rich and I have all of this. I don't. I work part time, but I have a really good support system within the Pacific Islanders Health Board. Like all
mm,
my sisters there, they've been because I was asked to talk about these a while back, and I didn't want to,
mm,
and for the longest time I wanted to leave, but I couldn't, I didn't want, because after so long, even though you have all these issues with that person, you still care about them.
yeah,
There were
mm-hmm,
some good times, I'm not gonna lie. There were good times and you do care about them, but it got to a point where you just, I can't, I really, really can't. And a really good point that Lita brought a while back was, you know how when you go on the plane and the flight attendant will tell you to put your mask on before you can put the mask on your child. It's the same. You can't help your kids or you can't help your community if you're not taking care of yourself first.
mm-hmm,
I've thought about that for the longest time. I'm sorry, Luca. I know you want it.
mm-hmm,
Together, I'm healing with my sisters. I got that support, and that's why I was finally able to say, you know what, I'm sorry, but we are both in a toxic relationship. I'm not doing any good for you, and you're not doing anything good for me. We need to do this. But then there are outside force, like our families and friends. They're the ones that are like, you know, not being understanding. Like I don't with my some of my families, I'm thinking I don't expect them to understand or agree with any of the choices that I make, but as my blood, I expect you to have my back.
mm,
I don't even have that support, but then they're saying it's only few people, but they're not close. They're just like far away, and I want to thank them. You know who you are. Um, but it was actually people that are not related to me that gave me the strength to just talk about things like this because it's really happening. I know that a lot of men in our community would threaten suicide and even go through it if the lady decides she wants to leave. There are things that are being, you know, happening behind closed doors, and all the women, I know it's scary. We think about, well, we have all of these kids. If I leave him, he's the breadwinner. Who's going to provide for us? Our family are just going to, because when I was in that other relationship, even though I was the breadwinner for that relationship, I was thinking, well, what about my kids? What about my kids? I need to think about my kids. And it was actually my dad who said, I'm going to take care of your kid. You just go.
Yeah.
And so, but see, my dad, he he's different than I guess most of the other people. He passed away, but he doesn't. He's untraditional, I would say, in a way where he doesn't do things that are normal, things that are considered taboo. He doesn't even think it's taboo. So, but I know that there are a lot of us that think about that. And I'm actually glad that Sala, you're here to talk about what you do, because a lot of us, I know that a lot of us Micronesians need to talk about this, and we need to know that there are people out there that are willing to help us with, finding homes.
Yeah.
That's one of the scary things right now for a woman. They don't want to leave because where are they going to stay?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Netta, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna say, um, oh,
Well, I wanted to say thank you, Esther, for sharing your story. I know it can be very difficult. One person that I always try to get to come share her story is my mom, but today she was like, "You better not embarrass me on social media." So I actually really appreciate you for sharing such a intimate and yeah, like very disheartening story. Like I didn't even know you were going through that. Um, so that so that should tell us like,
Yeah,
right? Like
Facebook lied. Facebook lied. When you go on Facebook, you're like,
yeah, you just
you're happy
never
on
know.
Facebook.
Right.
no,
Facebook
and
lied.
it's so true because I feel like while she was sharing her experience, she's also naming the support she needs,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
um, and how and what it looks like in our communities when
Right.
something happens to us.
Right.
The shaming,
Mm,
the hush hush, like the the control, right? Of
right.
which is also a sign of abuse. So it's like a cycle.
Yeah. I was like, did you want to share the slides really quick? I
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
wanted to talk about that. Oh, you can go to the next one because we already talked about DV being a pattern. Um, but what domestic violence actually does to a person, which I'm sure Esther felt this way in her situation, was DV, these patterns turn a person into an object, right? And so it's central to understanding DV is understanding agency. It sounds like from Esther's point of view, she was unable to freely be herself. And I don't want to speak for you, but it almost sounded like you were kind of doing things just to satisfy what the community wanted, what other people did. And so that's what agency is. It's your sense of self as a person and your ability to act powerfully, right? And make choices on your own behalf. And so I'm going to transition. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time. Um, so I'm going to transition, and we can talk about this in deeper detail later. Um, because I really wanted to share the power and control wheel. Um, because this is, I feel like this power and control wheel is where we kind of like are able to see the patterns of DV a little bit better. And so it's usually used to describe what occurs in an abusive relationship. So when you think of the wheel as a diagram of the tactics people use to use harm and keep the survivor in the relationship, and you'll see Esther named some of the examples. Um, but it's really important, like the context is the most important factor, is understanding abuse, especially when the abuse is not physical. Um, is that, how do I explain this? These are like the non-physical ways of abuse. So, for example, there's the use of coercion and threats. So, like threatening to commit suicide, threatening to report to people, embarrassing someone. People will use intimidation, like if you leave me, like I'll kill you, blah blah blah. Using emotional abuse, using isolation, and they're all very self-explanatory. Um, I was like, I really don't have the time to go into the power structure of it all, but one example that I will share, and I got the permission of this survivor to share this story, is earlier in their relationship, things were like fine, and this person is toxic as stuff. Um, but her partner moved her away from her family, um, up here from California, and he wasn't abusive or anything at the time, but he ended up driving her. Like she came out here, she was able to get a job. She's doing well. She's making a good salary. Um, I'm not sure what happened with her partner, but he actually drove her out one night. There was no fight, nothing. Just a typical drive out. They were just running errands, and he pulls up to a dead end in the middle of the night, and he tells her, "Get out." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "You heard me. Get out. Get out of the car. I have no use for you anymore." And and she starts crying and she starts begging him, like, "Please, I have no family here. I have no way back home. I don't know anyone here. Please let me just go with you." And he was like, "Nope, get out of the car." There was no violence used whatsoever, but he was like, "Get out of the car." And she ends up begging this man, right? And like me coming from a very like hustler mentality, I was listening and trying not to judge, but also like, you have way more money than him. I would have been left, like but in all reality, we know what he was doing. He was making her feel one, like he already isolated her from her family, from everyone that she knows, right? But now he's making her feel, even though she has the means, she has she has the resources and everything to get out of that relationship, he made her feel like she needed him. And like we that is, oh my gosh, like it was so hard not to cry listening to that story, because when we talk about domestic violence, right, we don't talk about these power structures, right? And so, Neta, if you go ahead and switch the slide, please. Um, so when we consider like stopping gender-based violence, right, we usually don't think of intervening in these individual acts, right? Like if we heard that story, we wouldn't, like normally we wouldn't be like, that's a telltale sign of abuse, right? Like we would be more like, oh my gosh, girl, like you're crazy. I can't believe you rode off with him, right? Like, but actually that right there is one of the patterns, right? Like, and so it's important for us to like know that like when it comes to supporting a survivor, I was like, how do I explain this? Sorry, because I'm like trying to jump all the way ahead of everything. But it's like important to know, right? Like that we shouldn't wait until, because later on she did end up getting like her ass beat, if you will, like she did end up, it turned into physical violence, it started turning into sexual violence, it started putting her children at risk, right? Like, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a responsibility for us as regular community members to respond to this type of harm before it actually turns into like big harm, if that made any type of sense. And you guys are, feel free to add on.
So, like in your, because I know someone who I've helped before, and they went back. Like, how do you, if you see it happening and you try to help somebody, but they don't want your help? I know that you, because a lot of times, sometimes these women would deny that they're even in an abusive relationship.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just wondering about what happened if that person keep going back. Like you help them, but then they keep going
Right.
back, keep going back.
So right. So that's like the complicated part of
Yeah.
supporting a survivor, right? Is that sometimes getting a person to safety isn't the best solution for the survivor, right?
Hmm.
So, something that I tell, like a common example would be if their perpetrator or abuser is the one who is the main financial provider for that person, it's very hard for that person to leave the situation um, because they rely on their abuser to support them, right?
Hmm.
Another example would be like the children, right? Some mothers won't leave um, their partners for whatever reason because they don't want their children to grow up with only one parent, right? They want
Hmm.
their children. So in those type of situations, it's very crucial to put emphasis on self-determination for the survivor. So it's really not necessarily trying to convince the survivor to leave, but trying to provide as much support for the survivor to be good on their own. So, for example, um, like I said, someone who is reliant on their abuser for financial needs, right? It's important to connect them to housing, connect them to job skill share, connect them to all these things. And another complex thing is, as human beings, we naturally seek connection, right? So if your abuser, whether it's good or bad, if they're the only person that they find connection with, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, people are human beings, like you can't blame a survivor for um, finding solace in their abuser. You kind of have to one thing that I have done in my own practice, like outside of APHI, is I try to do visits or house calls. My love language is gifts because I never have the time to like actually spend with people. So if I know someone is going through something that I try to do to make them feel not isolated is I'll text them like, "Hey, I was just thinking about you today. I hope you have a great day." Sometimes I'll send them a gift card. Sometimes I'll send them like Grubhub, right? And so then what actually happens to that person's brain is they're like, "Wait a second, like this isn't my only form of connection, right? Like I have a homegirl who actually cares about me, right?" So imagine if a whole community was doing that for you while you were going through what you were going through, right? Like how you like I think that's such a complicated topic and like a conversation on its own when you were talking about you still care about him, right? Like you like it's not like you hate him, and for me personally, I'm just like, no, of course not. Like, this is someone that you did things with, that you formed a connection. You obviously lived together, right? Like, you wouldn't cut off your own sibling, or I mean, some people do, but You know what I mean? But it's very, but you know,
Yeah.
it's very, it's complicated, right? And so that's what a lot of API Chaya's work is when we talk about building power. It's not necessarily that we're trying to get rid of violence because violence is always going to exist, right? It's trying to recreate the culture around it. How do we respond? How do we support? I think a good place to start is to stop judging. Like, right? Like,
Right.
we need to stop judging people based off of their situations because you only see one snapshot of a person's whole entire life, and you cannot assume that you know everything that's going on, right? Like, my brother's gonna get mad at me, but my brother Mario be getting on my last nerves, and I be clapping back, and everyone be like, why are you so mean to your brother? And I'm like, you guys do not even know, like, this fool be talking all this smack at home, like trying to tear me down. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah. Like if you're the talkative one and the other person is the quiet
right,
one, they think you're the bad one.
yes,
I'm like, oh, it's her.
yes.
It's her. She's the
Yes.
problem. She's the issue. So
Esther, that's
we
exactly what happens. And I just want the whole world to know that. But anyways, all jokes aside, I feel like that is like one of the biggest solutions within, like, I'm not going to lie. I will say, um, so I've done this work before, right? Like, I've done cultural work before, and I did step out of it, Oh my gosh, hi Adrian.
Hi. Hi,
But
Brittany.
I did step out of this work, and because I went through so much harm from the community. And so in coming back and re-experiencing judgment, I'm a drinker. I don't care. Like, I party, like, I'm not gonna be 100% this angelic sellout, like, I'm gonna be professional sellout when I need to be. I'm gonna be angelic sellout in the church or in the bars where I'm the most angelic. um like, I'm gonna be me, like. And something that I am learning is that that is very off in the PI community. So when they see someone who is like trying to do better, I don't know if this is like something that's deeply rooted within the culture or something, they try to tear them down. And I'm
Yes.
just like,
Yes.
yeah. And for me, I'm like, no, we're on the same team, like, we have, like, so part of not judging is also building solidarity, right? It's also partnering up with one another to lift this person up. um this is like the last tangent I'm gonna go on, I promise. But if you know me, I love plants, right? And the reason why I actually fell in love with plants years ago was because um, I don't know, I was reading some random book because this girl told me, plants have feelings. You shouldn't pick them. Oh, that's right. I was picking flowers, and she told me plants have feelings. You shouldn't pick them. And I was like, plants don't have feelings. And I was like, it's a thing. So she gives me this plant, or she gives me this book, and I can't even remember the book for the life of me. But basically, the book, it goes into like these old tales. It's like some Norse, like flipping Norwegian tales or something. And what it says is, you see the tree trunks and you see all these plants in the forest, but what we don't see is all the roots and stuff underneath the dirt. And what happens in a forest is when a weaker, quote unquote, weaker plant begins to die, the big tree trunks with the most nutrients start to send it all these nutrients. That's why you start seeing fungus grow on certain trees. It's because the bigger trunks or the bigger trees with the most nutrients start sending all these things underneath where we can't see it to the dead tree or the dead plant until it starts growing, until it starts growing again. And when I read that, I thought, if human beings apply that into their
Yeah.
daily practice, when we see someone who is experiencing harm, when we see someone who feels the need to turn to gun violence, when we see when we see all these things, right? We're starting to see kids committing suicide. We're starting to see overdose, right? We don't look at it as, oh, you're a bad person, you do bad things. We look at it as, what is going on? What is happening at home? What is the root cause to these are symptoms? Why is she so depressed? Why is she sad? And so the point of this is, when we talk about healing our communities, it's really a collective solution. It's really not that complicated, to be honest. Um, it's really like, yes, there are the necessary needs when it comes to which I will put some resources up when it comes to yes, yes, Esther. PIB is the big tree to your dying roots. And it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And we should never be ashamed to ask for help, because that is another thing that I am experiencing in the PI community. You should never, ever be ashamed to ask for help. And if we add a, sorry, it's going to make me cry because I'm a person who does not like to ask for help. So it's a little ironic for me to tell people, do not be ashamed to ask for help. Because when we apply our Christian lens, our Christian layer to that, right? Jesus came to what? To help, right? Like at the very basic need. That's how you really, like, I'm not trying to preach or anything, but for me personally, that's the real way of living a Christian lifestyle, you know, is you help people. You lend a helping hand. You don't judge people. Like, that's the beauty too when it comes to Christianity, right? When Jesus told them with the first stone cast, or them without sin cast the first stone, right? Jesus wrote their sins in what? In the sand, because it can be blown away. So when we think about, judgment and solidarity, I'm like, at the very minimal core, at the very baby level of like applying this Jesus mentality into our work, it starts with like not condemning folks, right? It starts with helping, it starts with solidarity, it starts with not gossiping, it starts with, oh man, I see my sister over there hasn't been smiling in a while. Let me go check in. Esther, how are you today? Right? And it's like really asking and being there fully. But, anyways, that's all I have to say about that. I'm going to end it right there.
That's
Yeah.
funny when you said, I don't want to ask for help. I do that too. I'm like, if you need help, please ask for help. And here I am.
Yeah.
No, I can do this on my own. I can figure it
Mm,
out. Try to figure it out on my own. But I think he came to love. I think if we apply love,
mm-hmm,
if you love your spouse, you ain't gonna hit them.
mm-hmm.
Your mom, dad, you're not gonna disrespect them or hit them. I think
Right.
love does covers a lot of things, and that's why he said it's the greatest commandment. Because
Yep.
without it,
It
you can
covers a
if you
multitude
don't
of
love your neighbor,
sins.
you're gonna steal from them. You're gonna kill them.
Right.
You don't even care. You're gonna look at them as objects. But if you love them, you're gonna see them as a person.
Exactly. And I think this is for another time, but I think when we look at perpetrators, right? When we look at abusers, that's another thing. That's a whole nother conversation, right? When we look at abusers, how do we like how do we not necessarily help them, but how do we help them find healing, right? What nutrients does this person need from the bigger tree in order to reverse their abuse, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a cycle. It didn't come out of nowhere. I
No.
don't believe that human beings were born to hurt others. I
Mhm.
think it comes with a lot of experience. It comes with a lot of things, internal things. Like I said, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
No, I was like when we were talking about PI, like the basic need of just helping and just supporting. And I see that in our communities, right? We pull up for each other when there's
Mm-hmm.
something happen. We're always like, "Oh, family goes there and support there," or like, "Let's go and try to figure out." But then helping each other became harder with all of the other factors that came in, right? Like violence, being colonized, being displaced from home, like all those things. So yeah, it's just sorry. I was just thinking as you
No,
guys
don't
were talking.
apologize.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was like, yeah, I mean, really that is what it is the opposite of DV and of to heal is literally love. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's something for folks to sit on is what does that look like, right? What does a loving community look like? And they actually have a concept for that. It's called transformative justice, right? Transformative justice is the transformation within the community that manifests naturally because we're doing the work, right? So the current way of punishing people now, which is why people are so afraid of like accepting the bad doer. Like, let's be honest, the reason why people are scared to like, people are scared to support a survivor is because in the past they've been punished for affiliated with someone who goes against the norm, right? Like if you go against the culture, you have been isolated. You have been deemed you are the black sheep. I mean, I'm sure your parents have said, well, my parents were the ones telling other people, don't bring your kids around my daughter because she's terrible. But you know, to my
Not even knowing.
but to my other siblings, they tell them, don't hang out with so and so, right? Like, don't hang out with whoever. And that's why people judge, is because we instill those things, right? But transformation is more of like, okay, like I see you, you exist, you're not a terrible person. What can I do to help you move through this, right?
Yeah.
What can I help you do to change what's within, right? Like what hit it, and it's not one of those things where you go to counseling, right? And it just happens. Um Something that we did in the past, and I'm hoping that we bring it back with the youth is teaching them Tongan dances, Tongan and Samoan dances, right? And so, in instilling their language into them, there's like this different type of power that they feel, right? Like they start feeling like, I know who I am. I'm not about that life. I don't need these things in order to feel like I have to prove that I have power over you. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to shoot you to show you that I'm more masculine, right? Like they can step into themselves and be like, yes, a stronger sense of identity. They can really step into themselves. But again, like I said, a whole other topic.
I know it's so much stuff
There's so much like
to
Yeah.
uncover with
yeah,
this topic. Yeah.
yeah, people don't even know. Like they just think like, oh my gosh, we're gonna come in and talk about I'm like, no, we're gonna talk about history.
Right, because it's a practice if we really want to heal, right? It's
It
not
is.
just like showing up and this is what happens and this is how it happens. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
we gotta like go through it together. We gotta
Yeah.
be, like, yeah, it's
So
just a lot
what do
of
you need? What do you need from
Mhm.
me? What can I
Right.
for?
And it's painful. Like, be
Yes.
honest. Like, healing is that's the part that people don't talk about, right? Healing is so painful. Like, I know with me and my mom's own journey, healing was so hard. It took me to go through depression. It took me to go through all these different phases, my drinking phases, my drug phases, my party phases, all kinds of phases of sell in order for me and my mom to finally like meet in the middle, right? Like, like, and I am so grateful. I wish my mom had Facebook so she could watch this and be like, this little girl, I told her not to talk about anything that goes on in our home. But those phases taught me to be transparent with my mom, right? Like, mom, these are the ways that you have been hurting me, you know, like you're on mute. You're on mute. Esther, you're on mute.
Oh,
What were you saying?
I was gonna say you and I need to chat. We need to have a
Yeah,
chat. We need
no.
to have a sit down because yes, our moms.
Yeah,
We're
right.
gonna talk about anything that would bring shame to this family, okay?
Mhm. Mhm. Right. And why is it so shameful, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
Which you're able to work through talking to your mom, right? Now you're
yeah, oh
changing.
yeah.
Now you're doing that whatever how do you say it? Breaking generational curses.
Right, right. But
'Cause
it was
now
yeah.
you're able to talk to your mom about it
Oh yeah.
versus we're not gonna be speaking about we're gonna just
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna
Because
pretend
now,
it
yeah.
didn't happen.
What happened?
It's like you just went from we're gonna pretend it didn't happen. So what happened?
Yeah, yeah. Right?
exactly.
Exactly. Exactly. And it took like when people see me and my mom, it took a long and we're still working on it, right? Still working on
Constant,
it to this
constant.
day, constant work. It's not like it's like, "Oh my gosh, we're good today and forever and the rest of our life." No, it's like we're good this week and then next week, I don't know, might have
I'm
dishes
gonna have to
smashed,
practice a little harder.
you just never know what kind of week you're gonna have, but um, the key to it all is just communicating, right? Even when it's hard. And that's something that my mom has made clear to me is like there's going to be times where she don't understand me. Like she's like I don't understand where you're coming from. I don't understand the work that you do. I don't understand this whole rainbow world that you've created for yourself, Stella, but I'm going to, try to listen. Like I'm going to try to listen, but I'm not always going to agree sometimes, with your ideals cuz and she'll tell me straight up, sometimes the way you think is stupid, like and so, she's just like that. And I've been looking
Right.
at her like, "Dang, I thought we had this conversation, mom. Like I thought we were cool." And she'd be sitting there looking at me like she'd be like, "No, sometimes the like, but at the end of the day, I couldn't have that transparency with my mom had I not gone through so much struggle and so much arguing and so much fighting and so like some people they fight and then that's it, right? But I think in the PI community, um, something that I hope the PI Health Board does is like healthy communication because especially when it comes to conflict, because
You're not
conflict isn't
confrontational.
always bad, you know? Conflict sometimes is just trying to understand, one another and trying to meet somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle. But a lot of times people are like, "Oh my gosh, they're fighting, it's bad." And I was like, "Ah," and I'll sit there and listen and I was like, "No, it sounds like there's
They're
a
trying to break
miscommunication."
through.
Yeah. Like sounds like something somewhere, didn't make sense. And so now they're yelling at each other because they're both frustrated, right? How do we have these healthy conversations in our family? Like,
Yes, at
like
home first.
right, without yelling at each other, like but yeah, just looking at our time here, I don't know if any of y'all had anything else to add.
No, I think I know we didn't get through everything we wanted, but I think like starting it's always right like starting with the beginning or like the root first or
Mhm.
learning and then unlearning. So I appreciate you too so much for being in this space and sharing what you had to share, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stella.
Um,
Thank you, Netta.
can I share it's like a poem or whatever just to close off.
Yes,
Um
please.
just so we're not like, thanks, bye, peace, y'all do whatever you want with this info. Um
Is it the last slide?
yeah, it's the last slide.
Okay, here I'll share it
Um
for you.
thank you. Um and the reason why I want to share this one is because or this at the end is because this is like I'm not going to speak for y'all, but this is like my vision, right? Like when it comes, like we understand that. violence is always going to happen, it's always going to exist. Um, but also, we can create safety amongst ourselves. And so, anyways, it goes, and this is by Rebecca Farr. I am not proposing that sexual violence and domestic violence will no longer exist. I am proposing that we create a world where so many people are walking around with the skills and knowledge to support someone that there is no longer a need for anonymous hotlines. I am proposing that we break through the shame of survivors and the victim blaming ideology of all of us so that survivors can gain support from the people already in their lives. I am proposing that we create a society where community members care enough to hold an abuser accountable so that a survivor does not have to flee their home. I am proposing that all of the folks that have been disappointed by systems work together to create alternative systems. I am proposing that we organize. And so, with that being said, I know I'm technically a guest, but I definitely want to, send a lot of gratitude and love to both of y'all. Um, this work is not easy. It's not. You're going to get criticized. You're going to get, pushed out of spaces. Being who you are, it's not easy work. And there are days where, you know, this work will show up in your own body to the point where it manifests into sickness. Um, it's not easy work. And so, I just want to send so much love and grace and gratitude to you both. And Esther, I hope that as you move through what you're going through, because I'm not even gonna lie to you, I was trying so hard not to cry while you were telling your story, because you know, in this work at the same time you meet all these amazing people, right? And you just want the best for them all the time. You know, especially when you have to go through that and carry the burden of like the community on top of like nonprofit work, on top of like deliverables and deadlines and blah 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 blah,
And
like
family.
family and church and the list goes on and on and on. And so I hope you find time to give yourself some grace, because you deserve at least that. You deserve grace, um, and understanding. Um, yeah, and so I just want to end by sending y'all both that love, and I really appreciated my time here. I learned a lot, and so yeah, ofatu.
Bye. Love you, ladies.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much.
much love. Ofatu. Thank you.